there's ever been any consideration of adding something to the name so
Right.
that people like myself would say, oh,
Sure.
this is worth seeing.
Right. So you point to a really interesting and difficult challenge for us. Very often there's a perception that things, and this is not I wouldn't suggest that this is your experience, but generally culturally, for many of us, when there is something which honours people who serve in the military, many of us perceive that as though there's a glorification of the military or of, and I'm not suggesting this is your perspective, I think it's a commonly held perception. In the same way then that a museum that tells a story of war, this is so terrible, why would we even give it any time, would be what many of us would say. This is so bad, why would I even want to go and see that?
Like the Holocaust.
Yeah. Whereas, in my view, it's absolutely essential for us to examine the horror of war to persuade ourselves that we shouldn't be doing this. And that's what this museum does. I'm proud of this museum that there is no triumphalism here, there's no chest beating, there's no easy answers. It portrays in the stories told, in the images there, the abject horror and terror and carnality of the experience. And we need to know that. And so those of us, including those who serve in the military, who have a commitment to peace, are able to, when they are able to see this, I think it's a persuasive argument for peace. So I welcome. Have you been?
I have not.
So in part because of what it's called.
Right. So what I'm wondering is, why not call it the World War I Museum of Peace?
Yeah, because it wasn't very peaceful then. It was awful.
Well, right. I realize that.
Yeah.
But you know what I would think in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I'll go to this museum and they'll show what all the battle plans were.
Yeah.
And how the troops shifted around
Right.
and whatnot. And it's like, I have absolutely no interest in that. But you talk about, recognizing the horrors of it, looking forward to peace, and then even that, okay, another part of that period is women's suffrage and women's rights and civil rights.
Yeah.
Well, I would have no idea.
Yeah. So we, for example, have a part of the story told is the experience of the African American soldier. So the African American soldier, they're conscripted, but they're not allowed to fight with the American armies. Isn't that bizarre? They had to fight with the French, under French command. And then when they're treated really well. And then when they come back to the United States, they're treated really poorly. A great impetus towards civil rights. So part of that story is told there. Give us a try.
Oh, I definitely
Yeah.
will. I definitely
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Will you at some time interpret the Middle East and the resulting settlement in the Middle East, which in my opinion has created the morass we find ourselves in right now?
Yeah. So yes, we in our public program we sometimes deal with that question of the Middle East and the morass that we find, the carving up, the divvying up the spoils. One of the great failures of World War I is in the treaty processes, where those who were seen as the aggressors or the losers were not at the table. They were excluded from the negotiations. And so the question then forces us to ask, what is the purpose of then reaching a peaceable solution? Is it to punish the aggressor, or is it to find a lasting peace? And we learned there would not have been a Marshall Plan had we not had World War I, because we learned that it's the failure of doing secret deals and the slicing up and creating new countries. So it's part of our public programming pieces is this conversation around the Middle Eastern experience. And we have some didactics in the museum about that as well. Let's have one more and then we'll wind up, Forrest? Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if I recall correctly that this was the war to end all wars?
Yeah.
And where did that impulse get started and what happened to it?
Yeah, that's good. I don't know who actually said that, but indeed it was considered that this was it. The world had never seen anything like this before. Remembering in that same period where in Serbia, in that area, there had been 2 previous civil wars in the previous decade, and they were just short wars. So this was considered, it was just another issue about rising nationalism, ethnic groups fighting one another. That's what this was seen as. And then, but in 6 weeks, all these declarations of war swept the world into it. And then by the time that we were finished with this, we were sick to death of it. The world had never seen anything like it. First mechanized war like this. Death had been 10 feet apart previously. Now it was 1,000 feet. So, there's an anonymity to war as well, which the world had not experienced. And in machine guns and artillery and tanks and gas and, the ethics of war were very different then than they even are now. And so the world said, this is it, we can't have any more of this. And then, it's over, we could never do this again. And the manner in which people were treated was significantly what contributed then to the beginning of the Second World War. We have 200 people who serve as volunteers at the museum. Many of them are guides. And they will often ask, particularly younger people, so when did the war start? 1914, when did it end? And no, it didn't end until 1945, and there was a bit of a pause in the middle. It was really the same war as what many of our folks would say. And I think there's some truth to that. Yeah, shocking. Yeah, and this is not the biggest war. We don't claim that, but it is the war. It was that completely reshaped the world, and we cannot underestimate the importance on the world and also on the United States and what it did, and on what it did on foreign policy and what Woodrow Wilson's impact has been as a result, and the emergence of the American foreign policy ideals in that period were all shaped, as part of the Great War experience. So my invitation to you is to come and see the museum, give it a try and experience it, to be a part of the commemoration, to learn about, understand the enduring impact, to understand what are the values that are important for civic engagement. This past election last week is the lowest turnout since 1942. That says something about civic life, doesn't it? So what's important for a civic engagement? This is all related to thinking about also about matters related to war and peace and conflict and so on. And participate as you can in our public programming. We have lots of online stuff as well. We have great online exhibitions. We have 20,000 photographs online, all searchable, and great resources online that we love for you to do. We're doing a project with Ancestry where we're creating a digital honour wall for those who served. And then the project over the next few months is where, these company photos, the big yard longs or metre long photographs, we have hundreds of them. And so they're all being scanned with, and Ancestry are coming in the next week or two to do all of this. And then we're going to be inviting people to tag their relative. And then you can write stories about those that you remember and have this great crowdsourcing experience of creating a national memory of the Great War. And that's going to be a project that we'll be doing for several years, and it gets kicked off soon. So thanks, people. Glad to have shared with you.
I want to say thank you for all you coming. This is probably the largest group one of the largest groups for our forum this year. And we have really excellent programs. This probably is one of the superior programs I think that we've had. So thanks to all of you for coming. Do come back every Wednesday. We have the University Community Forum here, and we welcome that. Yes, Paul.
I want to remind people who New Bridger League that the memorial for him is tomorrow night here at 7.
A memorial for Richard Lee tomorrow night at 7 here at ECM.
Yes, he was a regular
Yes, right.
for
He was. Thank you, Paul, for that. So again, welcome, especially those of you who are visiting for the first time. Do come back. Have a great day.
You're welcome.
Gary, I think I'm going to go online and see